Hi everyone, we're going to look at polyphonic textures, musicals and just general texture. First, I want you to think about describing the texture of these words. In New York, you can be a new man. Get a piece of paper and a pen so you can do that. We're just thinking about the vocal parts. Let's listen.
In New York, you can be a new man. In New York, you can be a new man. In New York, you can be a new man. In New York, trust you.
Okay, you can listen to this as many times as you want, but pause now and fill out the texture for each of those lines. You can also fill out lines 4, 5 and 6 as an extension if you want. Answers coming up. Okay, so the first thing is, the first line is in unison, it's monophonic. It's also in octaves as well if you want to add that. The second line is in 2-part harmony, it's homophonic and chordal. The third line is in 3-part harmony, it's homophonic and it's chordal. The fourth line is in unison, it's monophonic and in octaves. Same for the fifth line. And the last line is monophonic, it's actually a solo. All right, next question. How many ideas are going on through this extract? And how does the texture change all the way through? This is a lot more.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow.
And I am not throwing away my shots. I am not throwing away my shots. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shots. We gonna rise up, ain't time to take a shot. We gonna rise up, ain't time to take a shot. We gonna rise up, rise
It's
up.
time to take a shot.
Rise up, rise
It's
up.
time to take a shot.
Rise up,
It's time to take a shot.
rise up.
Take a shot.
Hey yo, it's time to take a shot, time to take a shot. And I am not
Throwing away my.
throwing away my shots.
Okay, the answers are about to come up. Instead of just writing one word like it's homophonic or it's monophonic, try and think about how it changes throughout this song. Pause now to write down your answers. Okay, answers are going to come up and we're going to go back to this extract to have a look at the texture. So let's go to the beginning first.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act.
That first section is homophonic and it's melody and accompaniment. Let's see what the next section is.
The creation, I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow.
And I am not throwing away my.
We've moved into a homophonic texture because there's lots of parts singing, but they're all singing different parts at this, but all at the same time. So that's a homophonic texture. There is also an accompaniment going on there, but it's a simple accompaniment. So I personally would call this texture homophonic.
Shots. I am not throwing away my shots. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shots.
We gonna rise up, ain't time to take a shot.
There's now an additional part added, and this is definitely not homophonic. It's definitely not all moving at the same time. We've got I'm not throwing away my shot that we already know, and we've also got this I'm going to rise up, time to take a shot going on at the same time. There's two ideas here, and there's the accompaniment, and this is a new texture called a polyphonic texture, which we're going to learn about today.
We gonna rise up, ain't time to take a shot. We gonna
Rise up, rise
It's
up.
time to take a shot.
Rise up, rise
It's
up.
time to take a shot.
Rise up,
It's time to take a shot.
rise up.
Take a shot.
Hey yo, it's time to take a shot, time to take a shot. And I am not
Throwing away my.
throwing away my shots.
And there's a homophonic texture there at the end, just to end the piece off. Okay, let's have a look at this new phonic word, polyphonic. Poly means lots of, and phonic means sound. But actually, this is just more than one musical idea. That's what it means, more than one musical idea. Remember, we don't count the drums in texture. Write that definition down. Polyphonic textures might look like this on GarageBand or Logic Pro, and you can see that the melodies are moving at different rates. They're not just all at the same time like in homophonic textures. Here's an example of a 2-part polyphonic texture. Here's a 3-part polyphonic texture. This is an example of a canon. A good example of this is when we do the 1-1-2-1 exercise and we come in at different times. This is called staggered entry. Here's another polyphonic examples by a band called the Beach Boys. There are 4 parts to this, which I've listed. The 4th part that says theremin at the bottom of the screen is the kind of quite high-pitched instrument that has a sliding effect that you can hear underneath the singing. Let's listen.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Good vibrations.
That's lots of different ideas in that example. There's also some other words that we are going to come to in the next lecture called counter melody, round, and layered textures, which are also types of polyphonic texture. We've already looked at canon, which is the 1-1-2-1. We're also going to look at this word fugue. Write that down. A fugue is where it's a bit like a canon, where it's the same thing and it comes in staggered entry, one after the other at different times. But instead of a simple melody like you'd find in a canon, a fugue tends to be a much more complicated melody. Let's have a listen to an example of a fugue from the musical Guys and Dolls.
I got the horse right here, the name is Paul Revere, and here's a guy that says if the weather's clear, can do, can do. This guy says the horse can do. If he says the horse can do, can do, can do. I take him Valentine, 'cause on the morning line, the guy has got him figured at 5 to 9. But there's an epitaph, he went to buy a hat, according to this here in the telegraph. For Paul Revere a bite, I hear his foot's all right. Of course it all depends if it rained last night. I know it's Valentine, 'cause on the morning line, the guy has got him figured at 5 to 9. But just a minute, boys, I got to be.
So you can hear in that last extract those 2 melodies going on at the same time. That is a polyphonic texture, and that's an example of a fugue. Let's have another example of a fugue from the Baroque time period, which has again these same melodies going on at the same time, but in staggered entry. This is a polyphonic texture. So that's another example of a polyphonic texture. Extra points if you can work out the instrument in that, which is the organ. Okay, you can still use these words thick and thin. Thick means more instruments, thin means fewer instruments. But at the same time, you really do need to be using the phonic words and all the other words that we've been looking at today. Okay, final question. This is quite a complicated question as well, and you're going to be listening to a long extract and describing the textures in as much detail as you can. Once you finish the extract, please pause and feel free to listen to it as many times as possible. The answers are right at the end of this video, so please make sure you pause and get your answers down on paper before you check them. Let's have a listen. We're splitting it into verse 1, 2 and 3, but warning, some of the verses might have more than one texture and you might have to describe when that texture happens. For example, verse 1 starts off polyphonic, and then at the end it moves to homophonic, 2-part harmony.
I hear singing, and there's no one there. I smell blossoms, and the trees are bare. All day long I seem to walk on air. I wonder why, I wonder why. I keep tossing in my sleep at night, and what's more, I've lost my appetite. Stars that used to twinkle in the skies are twinkling in my eyes. I wonder why.
You don't need analyzing. It is not so surprising that you feel very strange but nice. Your heart goes pitter-patter. I know just what's the matter, because I've been there once or twice. Put your head on my shoulder. You need someone who's older, a rub down with a velvet glove. There is nothing you can take to relieve that pleasant ache. You're not sick, you're just in love. You don't need analyzing. It is not so surprising that you feel very strange but nice. Your heart goes pitter-patter. I know just what's the matter, because I've been there once or twice. Put your head on my shoulder. You need someone who's older, a rub down with a velvet glove. There is nothing you can take to relieve that pleasant ache. You're not sick, you're just in love.
Come on now, snap out of it.
I hear singing.
But you just said that.
I know, but
I hear singing, and there's no
It is
one
not so
there.
surprising that
I
you
smell
feel very
blossoms, and the
strange but
trees are
nice.
bare.
Your heart
All day
goes
long
pitter-patter.
I seem to
I know
walk
just
on air.
what's the
I
matter,
wonder
because
why.
I've been there once or
wonder why.
twice. Put your
I keep
head on my
tossing in
shoulder.
my
You
sleep
need
at
someone
night.
who's older, a rub
And what's more,
down with a
I've lost my
velvet glove. There is
Stars
nothing
that
you
used
can
to
take
twinkle
to
in the
relieve that
skies
pleasant
are
ache.
twinkling
You're not
in
sick,
my
you're
eyes. I
just
wonder
in
why.
love.
Okay, pause the video and write down as much information that you can. Okay, answers are coming up, so make sure you finished before you press play again. Okay, these are my answers. I think verse 1 starts off homophonic, and it is melody and accompaniment, and it's not chordal, it's melody and accompaniment because it's a solo and the band in the background. Verse 2 is melody and accompaniment, but there is an instrument counter melody underneath, so you can argue that it's actually polyphonic, and I would say that's the answer that an exam would want. And then it becomes polyphonic later on. When we get to verse 3, you've got the man singing and the woman singing her melody underneath, so that is definitely polyphonic, and you can hear some brass melodies as well in the background. That's definitely a polyphonic texture. Okay, well done. Don't forget to check back for your next lesson next week.